In today's video, I'm going to show you everything you need to know about using projection supports along with grid, maybe a little bit of bracing, so you can make crunchy little videos like this all by yourself. Now you might be wondering where this big huge support block came from. It actually came from this Lure right here, which I printed, and I used a lot of projection supports on this model. I will say for models that are larger, have big bases, or have large flat areas that are keyed together, it works really, really well. This is all keyed together. This is just held together with some putty and a bit of a prayer. Let's see right here. Yeah, I haven't even sanded it yet, but when you have these big, large surfaces right here, that's really where projection supports really starts to shine, especially, like I said, this big base right here, which is where this big thing came from. Now, one of the big advantages is this may look like it's pretty large, but it's actually really, really light. There's very little resin used in this one. It's very, very structurally sound. It was a little bit hard to remove, as you'll see in the video, but that's what we want when we're printing something kind of bigger and heavy, like a big base or something really large. This feature works amazingly well in engineering parts or where like you just really need accuracy, but it also really saves you a lot of resin. If you're printing little things, the resin savings is smaller, but of course it adds up over time. Big things, the resin savings becomes pretty massive right off the bat. So, but anyway, with that, let's get going into the Lychee Slicer, and I'll show you all the different functions, how to use them, where they apply the best, and also, like I said, that extra little hint coming up for you. Now, first in here, you can see that I have the base that's fully supported, but what I want to do is show you how I got here. Starting from this, where we basically have the base with nothing on it. Now, I have gone through and I've done the hollowing and hollowing holes already. I have other videos on that one on the Lychee Slicer YouTube channel, so go check that out, and while you're there, make sure to subscribe and like on our videos. It really does help us out a lot. And from here, let's first talk about where to even find the tool I'm talking about. Well, that's going to be found under Prepare. And then from there, you're going to make sure you have support selected and make sure that the object you want to run the projection supports on is highlighted. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Make sure you have a manual over here on the right-hand side. And at the very, very bottom, all the way down here, it says Start Projection Supports. And when you click on this one, you're going to be left with a first step. And that first step is to select the areas that you want to run this program on. Now, there's something really important about the way this works. This is called projection supports because the supports do project from the object. So like on this case, if I was supporting this weird little mouse right here that is awesome looking, but actually terrible, the way the supports are going to work is they're actually going to support, they'll actually project from the object. So if this was here, the supports would project from here down, and they always want to find the build plate, but the build plate is ground in this. So they're going to come from here to there, and that's something to important to remember. And we can actually see that within the slicer. So if I come over here and I highlight these areas, you're going to see this little green arrow. This arrow is going to let us know which direction these are actually going to project from. And if I hold down Shift, I can actually change that arrow. This wouldn't work very well to have my supports projecting out of here, so I'm going to redo that. And then I'm just going to go through here and I'm going to select these surfaces. Everything in yellow is where the supports are going to project from when I run the program. Next, just click on Preview Supports. Now from here, you're going to be looking at something that looks a lot like this. It might look like a mess with a lot of settings. Now, the way this works is that global is probably like easy mode, but a lot less powerful. As you go through in the other two tabs, being border and infill, there's a lot more functions in there, but they're going to get a little bit slightly more confusing. But by the end of this video, you'll know how to use every single thing in there. You're going to be able to play around with this and be as creative as possible. So with that, let's get started with global. Now, the first thing we're going to have is the border. We can turn the border on or off and the infill on or off. Now, the border is everything around the island, I guess I could say. You could say it's around the object, but you can see here, this particular object has some texture to it. So only the part in black is considered like an island. Each black zone, its own island, and each one of those having its own border. You can also see there's these weird little round holes in here. If you hit cancel, you'll see this is where actually I had the hollowing holes. So the hollowing holes are respected when using this tool. Go back here and reselect these surfaces real quick. And you can see there they are. So let's turn on the border, and what we're going to see right here, you're going to see these little yellow dots that kind of go around all the borders. Each of these yellow dots represent where a support will be placed. If I click on add 1228 supports right here, it's going to do it really, really quick, and you're going to have a pretty good visual of what this looks like so far. This is with only the supports around the perimeter. Now, for some people, they might think that this is enough and they're done. For me, I like to have a little bit more, so I'm going to hit undo. and or just Control Z to go back to this screen. And I'm going to do a little bit more. This is a really big base. It's going to take a really long time to print, and I'd rather not take a gamble like that. So the next thing we have here is the infill. Now we can turn the infill on, and we're going to have almost 6,000 supports. Now if I add this one, it's going to take a little bit longer, and you're going to see it's going to be pretty wild. Okay, so from here you can see that's a little crazy, maybe too many. So we probably don't want to do that one. So let's edit this out a bit. All right, let's make this a little bit better. And hit Control Z again, undo that one, and let's see what we can do to make this better overall. And now, of course, I'm showing this to you on a large model. This applies to small models as well. And as I get through this, I'll kind of explain how that works. So first thing, we got the support type. There's grid, and then there's concentric and random. Now for me, grid is the best. I've not found a really good use for the other one, so I just stick to grid, and I recommend you do the same. And for tag here, this is where all the supports that are going to be projected in this function are going to have a tag to them. So if you want to use the select tag, you can select these supports later on just by using that select tag option. I'll show you that a little bit later. Now we have the important ones being offset and interval. Now under global, you only have one of each. So if we set the offset, let's show you what that does. Let's set that from 1 millimeter. Let's set that as 4 just so we can see what's going on here. What you're going to see is there's now these gray bars. There's two shades. There's light gray and there's dark gray. Light gray is the offset from the border, the islands that I talked about earlier. And the dark gray is the offset between the row of supports in the border, this row right here. So you can see if I turn those off, we're down to only the dark gray. So that row of borders and where the infill begins. So that's the difference between the two colors. And more on that in a little bit. It'll make more sense if it doesn't make sense right now. And of course, interval is how many supports we're placing. So right now, every 2 millimeters, there's a support. Around the edges, that's just in a row all the way around, just like, parade around the perimeter, back to our old school geometry classes. And then the infill, it's just going to be like the pattern. So of course, 2 is probably too much for the infill, but it's probably not enough for the edge. So we kind of have an issue here where we have too many supports in one way and not enough supports on the other. Plus, I would never use this offset. I'd probably use like 0.2 or something, which is going to just load this full up of like 7,000 supports if I ran this right now. That's too many. Let's drill into this, and we can do better than 7,000 supports for this thing. So I'm just going to abandon global. There's nothing I have to do to abandon it. These will take over. Now we're going to mess with the border independently, all by itself. Of course, here we can turn the border on or off. Here I can set the offset. Remember, now that's going to be that light gray one. So if I want to, I can increase that. So you can see that light gray one gets bigger, but the dark gray one there is really, really thin. You can barely see it. That's because it's set to 0.2. Now my recommendation for the offset is whatever the support tip size you're going to use that's half of that size plus 0.1 millimeter. That doesn't make sense. Here's an example. My heavy is 0.4 millimeters across. That's my largest support tip size that I use on exterior models. So I take half of that, 20, and I'd add 0.1, so 0.3. So on this one, I do this to be my offset to be 0.3. Oops, not 20, 0.3. Now I do this because I don't want the support tips to overhang the edge of the model. If you go too much more, you have to think about it. Half of your support tip it's in the center. So if I do, let's say 0.1 or even 0.2, some cases that support tip is going to get pretty close to the edge. You can see this right here is getting pretty close. It's probably going to go over the edge. When I peel it off, it's going to take a chunk out of the side of the model I'm going to see. So it's not quite enough. If I do like 0.4, it's probably going to be too much. And I like putting these support tips close to the edge, but not right over the edge. So that's why I came up with that little half of the width of the support tip plus 0.1. If you can remember that, you're good to go. Okay, so now the interval. Of course, this interval is only going to do the density, the interval of the border. Right now it's 0.2. Personally, I like it to be 1.8 when I'm using my heavy, which is 0.4. Now this is where it gets a little interesting. I've found that the thicker the support tip is, the higher on the interval I go. And the thinner it is, the lower. Let me give you an example here real quick. And I'm gonna show you a little sneak peek of that cool thing I hinted at the beginning. I have a support tip that I call Edge Dancer. It's a new one. I've been playing around with it. It still has some fine tuning to go. You'll see the support tip is tiny. It's like 0.24, I think, or 0.26. I'm still playing around with that. This is so small, in fact, that I would make my interval 0.2 instead of 2. And this is going to put them right up next to each other. In fact, I might even go like 0.015 or something, really close, where they're like practically slightly touching. I can't do that one, 0.1, where they're practically touching each other. But if I were to use a larger support tip, I would want that to increase. I can show you what this looks like here real quick. Before I do that, let's turn off the infill. I'm going to give you a sneak peek of what I'm talking about. So this is a lot of supports. This is 24,596 supports. So let's place 24,000 supports on this model. This might take just a moment. So you might have noticed this little scratch on my forehead, and I just want to address that right now. So I'm here to tell you that what happened was I was not mistreated anyway by the Lychee Slicer team. What happened was I was walking and I ran into a stage light. Definitely not the soft part, but the hard metal part. Ran right into it. Absolutely my own fault. Scratched myself up. Hurt pretty badly. On an unrelated note, if you could please subscribe to the Lychee Slicer YouTube channel, like all of our videos, comment on all of our videos. It really helps us out a lot to keep making videos like this for you. And it helps us out a lot to make sure the stage lights stay at a high elevation away from your 6 foot. Okay, yeah, so if you could please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel, it really helps me out a lot. And thank you for watching. Enjoy the rest of the show. And there we go. What we have is jail. Let's zoom out here a bit. Double mouse click, that'll bring us all the way out. Oh, my computer's chugging. So that's 24,000 supports. It doesn't look like it, but it is because they're very close to each other. There we go. If I select one, you can see what's going on here. This is like this really, really thin support pattern where they're all around the edges. The idea around this one is you end up with like this line of supports that should hold on well enough to print this thing, but leave no support damage whatsoever. Again, still playing around with it, still trying to fine tune it. I'll show you in a better example. For now, we'll just hit Control Z. And to talk about influence, let's look at this thing right here. So what we've really noticed as we do bases, especially, or really anything, is that the very bottom needs more supports. It's because it's where it's first getting started. It needs to be stable. By the time you get up to a certain point, there's a lot of support there. The thing's pretty stable. It's not going to really wiggle or flex around or too much. So as you build up, it needs less and less supports. So now the way you do that is less supports as you go up on Z height. Is Z influence, funny enough. So right now it's set to 1. If I take that over to, let's say, 10, you'll see these become much, much less dense. And I can move that around and they'll get more dense or less dense. And all that's saying is, and we can kind of see here as we look through this big guy. Let's put up to 10. At the very bottom, I've got my 1.8. But as I go further and further, higher and higher, they're getting more and more spaced out. And again, that's just to try to save us some resin by just decreasing the density as we go up on Z. Below the Z influence, we have island influence. Now, island influence is kind of interesting. If you turn that on, you'll see that the support preset and the tag also get enabled. This is where it's going to add extra supports based upon the size of an island, and you have some control over those types of supports. You can set them to be a different size, and you can even give them a different tag. So later on, if you wanted to locate, hey, which one were the island ones? And if you want to delete them or change them or anything with it, you can do that. Personally, for me though, I've tried using Island a bit. It adds additional supports to areas. And I find that I haven't personally, on the stuff I print, I haven't found that very useful. So for me, I just keep it at 0. But you're welcome to play around with that, see if there's something you like. If you find a preset that works really, really well or something you want to show off, reach out to us on the Lychee Slicer Discord, share your results, or here within the YouTube channel in the comments below. Now at the very, very bottom, I've got the double border option right here. I'm gonna turn that on so you can see what it looks like. You can see it adds a double border. 0.2 is probably not enough offset for this one. Let's set it to maybe like 1 millimeter. No, that's not enough either. Let's do 1, let's do 2. 2 millimeter, that's looking, that's too much, 1.5. There we go. Yeah, that's better. So with double border, I would use double border if you're doing like casting or engineering parts where you have some pretty expensive resin and you really just need this thing to print. And you want that extra security. The double border will give you some extra security, of course, at the cost of consuming a little bit more resin with some of the support shafts and support tips. It might also be a little harder to remove if you're using like a standard ABS resin. So just keep that in mind. It definitely has its uses, but for this particular print, for something like this one using standard ABS resin, I'm going to turn it off. And we're done with the border tab. We're gonna go over to the infill tab now and talk about that. So first thing, let's turn it on. And you can see we've got our beautiful little grid pattern here again, which is very, very dense. Now, a lot of the settings we talked about are here. And so we don't need to talk about them real quick. I'll just give you some of my tips and tricks here. So same thing, this is where we've got the different types. Grid, again, is my favorite. I just say leave it there. The offset, this is where we can set it independently of the two. This is gonna be that darker gray area. I'm probably gonna set this at like 2 millimeters. I just want it to not, 2 is maybe too much. Let's go down to 1. Yeah, 1 looks good. See, this is where on something of this size, actually, I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna turn double border back on. And you can see I've got that first border, second border. You can see where some of these corners we get a little bit of 2 support tips colliding there. I might go in there and like delete one. But anyway, let's go back to the infill. And with the offset of 1 millimeter, I think things are looking pretty good. I might even come over here on that offset, change it to like 2 again. A little bit of a space between each one. I think that's gonna work out really, really well. Okay, next thing is the interval. It's set to 1.8, which is really, really dense for an infill. 1.8 is what I use for the border, not the infill. The infill, I'm probably gonna go like 4. And that's going to really separate this out a lot. You might find 4 to be too many. That's where I like to be. This is a big base. I don't want it to fail. So I'm going to err on the side of caution. I think I've said that like a couple times now, but it's what I like to do. Z influence is the same. As we go up, we can actually change the pattern. It's going to be a lot easier to see on this, a lot prettier. So let's turn that up to 10. And you can see here, not dense enough. I like them a little dense. So let's bring that up a little bit more. Maybe like 3. I don't want this, like that's pretty far apart right here at the top. I think that's looking pretty good. 3.1, let's just do a good old solid 3. I think I'm gonna be happy with that one. Yeah, I like that. So you can see we're more dense here at the bottom. As we go up, less and less dense. And then tag, of course. We can set this tag dynamically created. Dynamically created is just gonna like label 1 border, 1 infill, and 1 the island influence if we had that enabled. But I'm just gonna leave those off for now. And okay, I think we're about had it. So let's go through and add the 1667 supports. That is a lot less than some of the other ones that we started with. So there we go. We've got something that looks pretty good. Now, one thing I did forget to mention is that under structure, I did turn snap to grid on first. Let me show you what that looks like if I don't. Let's turn snap to grid off. And there we go. So without grid supports, you can see it's a bit of like a crazy looking like bamboo forest or something. There's just way too much going on. So I'm gonna turn that back on and let's make sure I've got them all selected. And we're going to recalculate again. That's going to snap them all back to grid. That's really where you're going to save a lot of your resin as well with using the projection supports with the grid combined. It just kind of makes it so that a lot of the support tips share the support shaft. So I think on average here, I've got quite a few different tips per support shaft. So that's a really good way to save some resin on yours. Yeah, it looks like up here I've probably got two support tips for every support shaft on average. So it's about half density. For something this big, if I really wanted to go up even more, I could change that grid interval, let's say up to like 6 millimeters. That's going to put 6 millimeters in between every single support shaft. That probably bring my average up to like 3 or 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, probably between 3 and 4 support tips per every support shaft, which for something of this size is probably a good idea. I usually don't go up to from 5 to 6, but this is a really big base, so we'll do that. And then finally, the last thing is I'm just going to add bracing. And that's going to add bracing to the entire structure. Now, in another video, I'm going to go over bracing. I'm going to cover every single thing in bracing like I am doing here with the support projection. I think between these 2 videos, keep an eye out for that one. That one will be releasing soon as well. I think you're going to have everything you need to know to create cool stuff like this or even better within your next 3D print. If you're doing miniatures or you're doing something really large, well, medium size large like this one, it's going to make 3D printing much easier. Your fill rate's going to go down and your resin consumption is going to go down quite a bit. And here you can see just how beautiful this is. Now, if I wasn't talking, I could probably do this in like 15, 20 seconds, which is about how long it took me to do it for the real print. But I also want to say this isn't just for really big objects like this. Let's hide this and let's uncover something underneath. There we go. There's her hips. So you can see you could use this for smaller objects as well. So let's go over here and I'm just gonna do it really, really quick with maybe a little less talking. You can kind of just see how quickly this is gonna be. All right, so on this one, I'm gonna select. So let's go over here and I'm gonna increase this angle real quick on this surface selection just so I can get more of it. We're just gonna kind of go over here and just get all this. I got a little bit up there. I don't really care about that one. If I really want to get rid of it, I can hold down Shift and I can just kind of erase it. Hold down Control and erase it. But I don't think it was going to matter because it was going to project from here in the bottom anyway. I'm going to go over to my preview supports. I'm going to make a few adjustments because this is a smaller support. I'm going to turn off double border. And I'm going to go over to my infill. I'm going to make sure that this, the offset here, I'm going to make this smaller. Like let's say 1. Yeah, 1's probably just fine. We can kind of see where these supports are going. Maybe we're going to take that down to like 0.5. There we go. That's pretty good. And yeah, I'm using heavy and heavy. And let's click Add 75 supports. And there we go. So that bottom is done with this one. I still want to go through and grab some of these islands here on the outside, but at least that major bottom one is done in just a few clicks like that. So it definitely applies to smaller objects as well as larger objects. All right, and I think that wraps it up for this one. So I hope that at this point of the video, you know everything there is to know about using projection supports within Lychee Slicer. Now, we really love making videos like this for you, so please like and subscribe. It helps us out a lot to continue doing it. And as always, thank you for watching and have a good day.